fantastic. Thanks, Leanne. So I'll just give you a wee shout when I want to move on the slides. So really pleased to be here this evening just to talk people through some of the things that we're doing as we get ready for COP26 across education in Glasgow. And you can see there that our hashtag for anybody is hashtag our dear green place. So if you just want to move us on there, Leanne. Thought it might be quite important just to share with you some of the bits and pieces of background, some of the key information. There should be around 30,000 delegates alone coming. Starts on Sunday the 31st of October, not November, and it runs right through till the 12th of November. And we're expecting about 197 heads of state coming. One of the things that parent councils might be interested in knowing about is that the Youth Day of Action is on October the 23rd, and that will be through in Edinburgh. That's a Saturday, Leanne, if we just pop on. There are two main zones. And we've got the blue zone, which is a site which is managed by the UN. So effectively, it becomes almost like a little country there at that point in time. And that's where the SEC arena is. And that's where all the formal negotiations take place. And of course, there'll be side events there. But every day we're expecting, in terms of attendees, about 12 to 15,000. So a lot of people in around the SEC exhibition site. The green zone is managed by the UK government, and that's a place where people who are not necessarily delegates will be, but there will be events and exhibitions and workshops and talks, and that will be over at the Science Centre. Another area, as we move through the slides, just to be aware of, is that over at SWG3, which is over in the Finnieston area, there is a New York Times climate hub, which is where there will be press, there'll be community events, education events, and a lot of the speakers who are in various other things across the city will be talking there across the time of COP26. And if we just pop on to the next slide, Leanne, just to tell people a little bit about some of the things to expect. If we've got 30,000 delegates coming to the city, we will also have a number of other people coming to the city who want to be involved, who want to go to events that are right throughout every area in the city. And of course, with that, as with any event, there will be possible congestion. There may be diverted routes of traffic, and at times there might be unplanned closures. But with anything in Glasgow, we will take that as it happens. We have contingency plans in place, and all the range of government and local authority officers are involved in that. There's a huge demand just now for accommodation, and some of you will have seen pleas on Facebook and social media for spaces for people who are coming along, and I know that a lot of people are now getting involved in that. And there'll also at times maybe be a bit of a high demand for public transport. So it's been aware of that during those 2 weeks, that this is probably the biggest event that Glasgow has ever hosted. There may be protests, marches, and they will be planned, and there may be unplanned ones. But the approach that we're taking is that protest and raising voice around these really, really important issues is something that, working with the police, etc., that we are encouraging that peaceful protest to happen. But obviously, at times, there may be some disruption in amongst that. And I know that parents, young people across the city want their voices to be heard during this time as well. Okay, Leanne. Number of road closures, and I've just popped these up. I don't expect you all to write these down, but what I would say is to keep a really close eye on the press, on the Glasgow City websites, to see where those kind of road closures are already planned. And I'm sure that you will have seen that there has been some chatter across the city around access to the SEC, etc. And again, people are raising voices about that and talking to the council about that. But really that area around the SEC, around the Science Centre, around Finniston will be an area where there will be limited access, particularly for vehicles during the event. Okay, Leanne. And really the last wee bit about that background information is I guess for individuals in the city to be aware that we know across NHS, across the council, that there may be an increased demand for public services during that time. And if we're aware of that, then we can put the plans in place to make sure that we're still providing the services that the citizens in Glasgow would be looking for. There'll also obviously be increased security around the conference area and key sites around the city. And again, you will have seen recent press coverage of the work that police are doing, the work that is being done right through the city to make sure that we're confident around security. And obviously, COVID-19 has not gone away. It's still here. We are hosting this event during a very challenging time in the country and worldwide. And there will be restrictions for visitors as they come in around quarantine. And you will have seen in the press that vaccinations are being sent out to some of them, particularly those in the global south who have maybe had less access to vaccinations, to enable those delegates to attend and to open up COP26 to all who want to be there. Okay, Leanne. So one of the things in education as we began to plan for this was we had a little look at one of the, it was a TED talk actually, where Christiana Figueres had talked about her lead role taking forward the Paris Climate Agreement. And what she had said from the beginning was, impossible isn't a fact, it's an attitude. And that's where we're going with this in education services. We know that some people are really, really concerned about the impact that climate change is having on the planet and how it will impact, in some ways, more on our young people who are those that are least responsible for the things that we are doing just now. But our attitude in education services is we can change things, we can engage the world, we can change the world. And this is about working with our young people across the city to move that forward as we try and improve things and outcomes in terms of climate change. And also we wanted to really relentlessly, as she said as well, inject optimism into the systems that we work with in education services. We wanted to be able to engage the young people in their political literacies and having their voices heard across these really, really important issues, in something that they may never see again in their lifetime, an event like this in their city. So for us, although this is obviously a global event run by the UK government, this is something that's all about, for us, Glasgow's young people and how they can be involved in raising their voices and sharing their opinions across world leaders and systems as they visit. Thanks, Leanne. Now, we've put some links up here because we would love for the parents who are here tonight and any other people who watch this later on video to really engage with these conversations. So you can find us on Twitter, and there's our Twitter handle there at EDIS Glasgow, which stands for the Education Improvement Service in Glasgow, which is a really broad remit across curriculum, learning and teaching, supporting improvement. And we're currently using a couple of hashtags. And the reason that we're encouraging people to use those hashtags is because we can scoop up everything that comes up there. So we have some people across the city who are videoing all the tweets that are coming from our schools with the hashtag Our Dear Green Place. It's something that is about the city. Our young people know what Dear Green Place means. It has that real Glasgow feel to it, and it's an easy way for us to scoop up what our young people and our staff, our teachers, our parents are saying across the city. And the other hashtag that we're using there just now is Countdown to COP26, and that's one that the council are using more broadly. And another one would be hashtag COP26. So if you're sharing things, you want to talk to us, you have photos to show, videos to show, comments to make, please get engaged in those hashtags with us and encourage your parent councils and those that you're working with in your schools to get engaged with that as well. As we started this journey, we've set up a number of places to see things, to share things. So we have, for instance, for our staff, a Microsoft team where they can discuss issues, concerns, lessons around climate change and our approaches to our Dear Green Place work. We use Glow, which you'll all be aware of, and we have an education improvement service, Glow Tile, with things up there which teachers can access and share with their young people. And we set up a specific YouTube channel, which is called Our Dear Green Place, which we're curating videos from across the city. So we've got about 50 or 60 videos of young people up there just now, and I would imagine that that will grow exponentially as we head into COP26 and through it. And again, just to reiterate, follow Ateatus Glasgow, get involved with those hashtags and come engage in the conversations. Okay, Leanne. So what did we do to get ready for COP26 and our Dear Green Place in Glasgow? Well, probably one of the first things to say to everybody here just now is that this is not new work to us in Glasgow. For our schools, that's a continuation of the lot of the work that they do already around Learning for Sustainability, LFS. And what this is allowing and enabling us to do is really focus back in on that, reinvigorate it, push forward, because we want consistency across every classroom and across every playroom in Glasgow, so that they are taking forward what is an entitlement for our young people as part of Curriculum for Excellence to have access to learning for sustainability learning experiences. So for a number of years, we've had a Learning for Sustainability steering group, and they run an award system effectively, where we recognise schools where they have been doing work around growing good citizens and learning for sustainability. So that group over the past year have been re-looking at that self-evaluation tool and a recognition system, a wee poster there, and they have been rewriting aspects of it just to bring it a bit more up to date. And that will be launched again, probably just after Christmas, as a next step after some of the work that they're doing in the lead up to COP26. And Sarah, who is here, will be heavily involved in that work. And that work includes a number of other head teachers who run that group across the city, leading on this. Thanks, Leanne. The next piece of work that we've been looking at for about a year is we have, for our staff in our schools, we call them frameworks. And effectively, what they are for different curricular areas is a way where they can work through the Curriculum for Excellence E's and O's in little bundles to make it easier to navigate it. So we had a working group from early years through to secondary schools who came together and developed our social subjects framework. Now, we've put the link there. If people click it, because I know that Leanne will share this PowerPoint out later, you can see that social subjects framework. It is being added to, and it's been further developed as we work through COP26. So we again want to hear voices, comments, people coming back to us on that. And I think you will enjoy having a little look at it and working your way through it if you're particularly interested in these kind of areas of work and social subjects. And Sarah, again, who is here today, is to trade a social subjects teacher before she was promoted, and she's hugely interested in pushing this forward and making sure that this goes through every stage in the secondary and not just to the end of third year. So a big push and piece of work going on that just now. Okay, Leanne. Next thing that we have been doing to get ready is we have a citywide young people's forum. And if you go on to some of those hashtags, you will see in the Our Dear Green Place some of the chatter from them. They were meeting yesterday. They meet at least once a term with some of our officers. Carolyn Davron and Gary Conde lead on this, along with Sarah, and they have a range of facilitators meet with the young people. Yesterday, they were meeting with people from neighbourhoods, regeneration and sustainability, so officers from there were helping to facilitate the conversation. And that's a group of young people from the older stages in the primary and first and second year and secondary who come together. Just now, unfortunately, because of numbers, we have to do that on Teams, and we have usually about 250 young people come together from the schools across the city to talk about a range of topics. Over the past 2 years, we've been heavily focused on getting their views around climate, around learning for sustainability, and around children's rights, UNCRC. And those young people, you can see there's some of the things that they have been saying to us about learning for sustainability. Sarah will come on to this in a little while to talk to you about the climate charter for our young people and children, which they have developed, which will be launched with a civic event with the Lord Provost. Mayors from around the world, we hope, will be there on the 5th of November. And we are looking to taking that forward as quite a radical step. It will be a charter which adults will sign, an intergenerational charter, which young people will sign, and it will have missions effectively for the adults to take forward and for young people to take forward at home, in their schools and in their community. They've also worked really, really hard on developing children's rights approaches across the education services. So if you move that on, I'll show you that next bit, Leanne. So what that forum have been working on is developing what we call a 5 pillars approach to children's rights across the city. And this is going to be launched just before COP26. This has been a huge amount of work for them and for teachers across the city. And they have said to us that in terms of children's rights, the things that were really, really important to the young people and the children were that their voice was heard, that we really focused for them on that feeling of belonging and relationships, and that absolutely links into our work on nurturing city in Glasgow. They wanted to really be focused on learning, and through learning, their rights. They wanted to have agency and be able to act on their ideas and not just use their voice to say things that we didn't take forward in terms of policy. And hugely interested in equity and equality. And the voices of our young people at these events come through hugely. They are really strong, and they're an absolute credit to the city when you listen to them at it. And I know, Sarah, that was one of the first times yesterday that you had been at it. And it was just wonderful. And our colleagues from NRS, I think, were overwhelmed with the young people's voices, the things that they were saying, the ideas that they have. Okay, Leanne. Next wee bit in this getting ready story, which went on for some time, was we then thought, okay, we're going to try and get ready for COP26, but if we want to do all of these things properly, we need to move some of our remits about with our central education improvement support team. We maybe need to put a wee bit of additional resource into some of these bits of work, and we need a big, big push on the rights respecting school awards across the city, because those relationships, that respect, rights are the things that underpin all the work around learning for sustainability and ultimately well-being and learning in our schools. So in terms of that, we have our Learning for Sustainability team. We have 2 head teachers who work with us a day a week, Rachel Binney and Mary McCall. We have put an additional officer in to support our work on children's rights. And that officer, Gary Condy, will be also supporting rights respecting schools and taking that forward, and really pushing on the eco-flag system and just making sure of that consistency across. And underneath there, brilliant news, and you'll hear from Geraldine later. St Paul's Shettleston, where she's head teacher, achieved their Gold Rights Respecting Award. This is a huge achievement, as did Hindland Secondary during this summer. We've also got a little picture on that slide down the bottom of Blair Vaddock, who should get a little shout out here at this point. Blair Vaddock is, as you will know, a residential centre, and Blair Vaddock and the people who work there have been mapping orienteering maps for every single school of our city's playgrounds, and they're currently working on mapping where there are gardens in schools, so that we can work closely with our colleagues in NRS over the coming months after COP to hook our schools up where there may be a really urban school with very little outdoor area space for a garden, to maybe allotments, local parks, etc. Okay, Leanne. Other biggie is, and I'm sure you will be aware of some of these things, we have an educational international links officer, and she has been working on a range of projects across the city for several years. We've had schools who have been involved, for instance, Kings Park Secondary and the Global Walk Initiative, which you can find out more if you click on that little link. And a biggie that's happening during COP26 is a big MOOC. Effectively, it's an online and learning environment where schools, universities will be able to come together. Other additional links that we've made on top of our Twin City links, on top of the international links and projects that are underway. Some of them were Erasmus type projects. We are now hooked up with the school board in Edmonton in Canada, and we are taking forward a number of projects with them. So for instance, 3 secondary schools are working closely with secondaries in Canada on decarbonisation. We've linked up some of our head teachers so that they have peers in Canada to support them with leadership. And there are a range of other really exciting things coming in the next few weeks from Edmonton, including the charity there that we're working with, who are going to be bringing 50 young climate leaders from 50 countries across the world, and they will be able to visit and talk to some of our schools. Okay, Leanne. Huge piece of work in Glasgow, as you can imagine, because it's a big city, have been the amount of partners and offers that we have been inundated with, I think would be the only word, to support our young people in the work that's happening just now. And it has been amazing. From business links to third sector partnerships, we are overwhelmed with the positive offers that have been coming in, and these range through all sorts of things. We have a hydrogen challenge underway just now, where Scottish Power and other businesses are working with some of our schools on a big competition, which the final winners in Glasgow will be chosen at the end of October, and then hopefully, fingers crossed, they will be at the final for the nationwide one in Scottish Power at the very end of October. We have young people just now who are designing wind panels, and you'll see some of those in our tweets. We have a launch next week of the WWF resources, which teachers across the UK have been involved in developing. And they will be out in a school launching that, and what they're calling their Forest of Promises, where children across Glasgow and the UK and the world, in fact, can pledge promises. We're engaged with Oxfam, we're engaged with the Glasgow Science Centre, who've been doing amazing work with their schools, some of which, again, you will see on Twitter, where they've been out and about in parks, and I think they have some on this weekend, and they've been hunting for honeybees, and they've been playing with dough and doing things with rainbows and all sorts. And we have a number of fantastic professional learning events for our staff who are going to be attending at the Glasgow Science Centre. Centre. And indeed, we have a number of young people who are going to have the opportunity to go to the Glasgow Science Centre during COP26, right in that main zone, to undertake some work there at the Glasgow Science Centre. WASDEC are an amazing partner of ours in Scotland. They have pushed throughout the city professional learning activities for our staff around climate, around learning for sustainability. They have umpteen different projects for the young people, and they've just been amazing. Today just started. I noticed that Shawlands Academy were tweeting earlier. They have been down preparing what's going to be a 2-arch mural on the Broomielaw at the bridge to the Riverside Museum. So all the delegates will see that, and they're working on that along with Hillhead High and Sunnyside Primary. Sunnyside, some of you will know, are some of our chief campaigners across the city who had great success with no straws at all and got Glasgow City Council to remove straws in our canteens. We worked with the Young Enterprise Academy, and we are hoping some of our young people will be up at, it's called a Dragon's Den, with some of their young enterprise, social enterprise projects during COP26, which is up kind of near St Patrick's area in Anderston. Lost Woods, I'm sure you're all aware of, busily planting trees, and our young people are heavily engaged in that. We're working with Wild Hearts on a 2-week event that is happening in the West End, where a number of schools will be attending for visitors. And a big event for us is a women and girls event, which will be happening for the 2 weeks of COP26, where all of our 3rd-year girls will be going to the University of Caledonia and listening to themed conversations and activities. And of course, what we have really pushed on is engaging and broadening the links that we've got across all of our teams in Glasgow City Council, so that we can prepare projects and links and events before, during, and of course after COP26. Okay, Leanne. We have agreed a focus across the city on the Sustainable Development Goals, and we chose 3 because we thought these 3, listening to what our children said, really resonated with some of the things they were saying to us at our Young People's Forum. They really wanted to focus on reducing inequalities. They were hugely interested in climate action and change. And they were also very interested in their voices being heard, so that there would be peace and justice and strong institutions in their city and across the world. So that's our key focus of Sustainable Development Goals. But of course, our schools will be working across a range of those Sustainable Development Goals in the work that they're undertaking. Okay, Leanne. Not new for Glasgow, as we've said already, part of our ongoing work. And some of the things that our schools will be working on just now are on these slides that I'm just going to move through quite quickly, but around climate change, around climate justice, and how that can adversely affect some communities and countries more than others, Leanne. They are also working on reduce, reuse, recycle. They are doing work around sustainable consumption, carbon emissions, renewable energy, habitats, biodiversity, etc. So the full gamut of work that you would expect to be seeing will be happening in our schools. Okay, Leanne, and I have to say, we were saying just before we started tonight, Sarah and I, and of course, Geraldine is in school all the time, but we are out and about, and Catherine Farrell, who will be here as well today, visiting schools as we have done throughout COVID, doing our pastoral care role, doing our support and challenge role. And every school that I am visiting just now thrusts something into my hand to tell me what they're up to with COP26, what they're planning, what litter they've picked up, what video they've made, who they're writing letters to, etc. So just wonderful to see. By the end of that, we would hope that any young person in Glasgow who we spoke to would have a good understanding of climate justice and climate change, We would hope that we would be developing skills and knowledge and attributes which they are going to need more than any to lessen the impact on the environment. And we would hope that all of our practitioners across Glasgow would have a much better understanding of those sustainable development goals that I've mentioned there, Leanne. We hope that this will produce a legacy. This isn't just a one-off for us. This is what we believe in education services. It's about making the world a better place. It's about enabling our young people to have a voice and to have agency and to be really engaged as good citizens of Glasgow as they move through their lives. So we want all of them to access that entitlement about sustainable development learning. We want them, all of our practitioners, to really understand their role in this work. Okay, Leanne? And we want all of those resources that we have out in those schools so that our practitioners have a broad range of tools so that they can use that to really deliver learning for sustainability well. The highest quality learning and teaching is what our people can do when they have those resources to hand, and we hope that's doing it. And also, we hope by engaging with, for instance, this group tonight, that our young people and our families also can engage in making those sustainable choices, and that their voices ripple out from the schools into their wider community, locally and nationally. Because our children today are not just, it's not just them that we're working with, it's our future children, their neighbours, their street, their family, their communities. Okay, Leanne. So, some of the things for you to have a little look at after this. Again, we want to really enhance that political literacy understanding in those young people and how they can engage in society and make their voices heard. We held a launch for this on the 12th of May. We had around 20,000 young people from across the city attending that live launch. And no mean feat, those young people had us trending number 3 on Twitter UK, which is quite a number of tweets, I might say, to get to that point. There are a couple of videos there, if you've not seen them, which I'm sure you may enjoy. The first one is about Glasgow Education Services. It's about 3 minutes, and it's really a welcome to delegates, to people coming to Glasgow so that they understand what education services is about in Glasgow. And the second link there is a video of the launch. Now, there will be sticky wee bits at the beginning because we were practicing Teams live, but it's about 57 minutes long, and it has some special treats in it, tells them about climate change, global goals, lots of really lovely videos from our young people. We've got some music with Highland Cathedral, our young people playing it, etc. So that's available for you to look at later. Okay, Leanne. Other things that we've pushed out to our schools, a lovely branding package, which has our Dear Green Place on it, because we wanted to really theme this up so the communications were good. Your second link there, we are at about 16,000 downloads on this so far. That's a lot of teacher downloads who are reading this booklet, and that is our updated weekly Get Ready for COP booklet with a range of citywide offers. So not the things that individual schools are doing in terms of businesses that we're taking out to them or third sector, but citywide offers that people can get involved in. We have Rejigged, our Glasgow Online, which is our intranet, and we have stories being punted out there daily across Glasgow City Council employees. And we have a YouTube video there beneath, which has the playlist of some of the children's videos, which I'm sure you want to look at. And for those of you who want to look at it broader, the getreadyglasgow.com takes you through some of the City Council's approaches to this. Okay, Leanne. Current activity, you can see there, huge range of resources, projects from Glasgow Create, from our PEPAS team, from our Connected Learning Digital team, from a range of other partners, and that's all in that booklet, which you can look at before during and after COP26. Our schools just now are just finishing off a questionnaire for us, telling us what each school is doing before, during and after. It's not due in for about another week, and we've already got around 80 or 90 responses. So we're looking for one from each school. So we're more than halfway there. So we expect to have all of that in. And an awful lot of side events, mini conferences, hubs, leadership events, projects are right now really kicking off, and you'll start to hear information about them, I'm sure, from the children in your own houses. Okay, Leanne. One thing to look out for in our Twitter feed is we put up a little activity every week, and we would love it if our parent councils could also encourage these in the schools. So this week's activity was, come on, schools, let's get those windows decorated. Let's have a climate trail. The schools are the shop front of our city. If you're visiting here and you drive past the school, walk past the school, scoot past the school, we want people to see what our schools are doing from their windows, from their railings, what's happening in that school. So you will see different things in different weeks that are coming out as activities. Okay, Leanne, we're nearly there for Sarah. And we've got various updates going into that booklet this week. We are sharing our work across the country. We're involved with the Police Operation Urim discussions. We are talking to the government. We're talking to Education Scotland, curating the resources, and a number of additional things that you can see there are going to be added to that booklet in the coming 2 or 3 weeks. And a lovely wee resource from Parents for Future, our other mother, I think, is going in this weekend. Some really nice art resources which are being produced from them. So lots of partners supporting us with this. Okay, Leanne. And this is what Sarah is going to talk to you a little bit about, which is the work that we have been undertaking on the Children and Young People's Climate Charter, which is launching on the 5th of November. And I think, let me just see the next slide, Leanne. Yep, if you just go back again, I think that's us just at Sarah's part just now. So she's going to talk you through this and some of the things that parent councils can be engaging with around this, and then some other ideas for parent councils. Okay, Sarah, you're good to go there.
Yeah, thanks, Andrea. So hello everyone, my name's Sarah Richford and I am QIO in Glasgow, and I have the responsibility for learning for sustainability, as Andrea said. So we've keenly been working on the Children and Young People's Climate Charter. This has been an excellent project to become involved in. We started off looking at the Sustainable Development Goals, and I know Andrea's told you a little bit about those already. And what we did was look at how those goals related to what was Glasgow's missions. So as a council, as a local authority, what were our missions related to that? And then what we had the opportunity to do yesterday was then take those to young people and say, this is what the council have promised. What will your missions be as a result of these promises? And the outcomes for that were absolutely incredible. Next slide, please, Leanne. Thank you. So we asked the children, as young people, we want you to change the world. So the theme that we had was engage the world to change the world. So we asked the young people, you know, if this is what the council promised to do, what can you do in your school, in your home and in your community to, you know, support that change, to marry up with that? What's the action you can do? And it was about those actions, and the responses we got from the children were absolutely incredible. We had well over 150 schools, which was no mean feat in teams, I can tell you. But Carolyn did an excellent job managing that, sucking us in and out of rooms all day long, which was great. But it was a really, really brilliant way to hear the young people. And what came out throughout all the conversations that we had right across every area of the city was that young people were desperately keen to become involved. They were so aware of the impact of climate change. They were so aware of issues you know, not only in their local communities, but also globally. So many of them referenced not just what was happening in Glasgow, but what was happening, you know, to the weather, for example, with the extremes of weather and things. So the engagement from the children was absolutely incredible. Can you just move on, please, Leanne? So when we spoke to the children, they were telling us about what was happening in their schools and in their homes. And one of the things that we spoke to them about was, you know, well, in your home with your family, what can you do? And the same themes came up all the time. So what we've done tonight is kind of split your mission, I suppose, as parents into two. First of all, as families, what you can do. So just in your houses, what can you do? What conversations can you have? Because what was really clear was that the children were going home and they were talking to the parents. You know, they were engaging with news items. Perhaps the children maybe watched news round in school, and then their parents were maybe watching the news at home. So all the same themes were coming up. And a lot of it was just around the basic things you can do in your house. So reduce, reuse, recycle. And I know Andrea mentioned that earlier, but these were the crucial things that were coming up all the time. You know, making proper use of recycling bins, you know, thinking about litter in the community, going on walks, doing litter picks. All of these things the children mentioned very frequently. The other thing which really struck me with the children was they were so aware of transport and the use of cars, you know, next to schools. Some of them spoke about walking buses. You know, there was lots of different solutions that they offered to try and minimise traffic in schools as well, and around schools. So they were really, really aware of it. So I suppose the first thing was to look at ideas as what you can do as a family. Now, one of the great sites that I like to visit for inspiration sometimes, if you can just move on, Leanne, please. Thank you. This is one that I like to visit personally, again, with my family, and it's 52climateactions.com. And this is a really good way of just as individual families having a wee look for ideas for inspiration, because you might be thinking, well, I would really like to help and I would like to support the children in what they're learning, but I don't really know where to start. And this is a really great website for breaking things down and, you know, showing you, for example, what you can do about waste or transport or recycling, whatever it happens to be, but it gives you some really good practical ideas, and it's designed for children as well, so it's really accessible for them. So that's somewhere I would recommend you have a little look if you are just looking for inspiration. If we just move on, Leanne, thank you. But I suppose the other part of that is parent councils. What can you do to support your schools? So Andrea mentioned earlier the booklet that we have, the Countdown to COP booklet, and that has been so well used in our schools. And again, I would actively encourage you to use the link and go on and have a look. What I found it really useful for as a parent would be going on, first of all, seeing the different links that are available. So there's lots and lots of websites that you can visit from that, and you can look at those links. But also, and Andrea referenced it earlier as well, is the weekly challenges. You know, just having a look at those challenges and seeing what you can do. And again, it's a really good way to keep the children's interest and remind them, you know, it'll be a different challenge every week. So it really keeps them actively engaged in what happens. The other thing as a parent council, I would advise you to have a wee think about as well is what's actually going on in your own schools. Andrea mentioned the Forest of Promises event with WWF, which is a lovely idea. And on the actual website, you can download little leaves and print those out, cut them out. And you can make those with your children. On one half of the leaf, the children write down a promise, something they're going to do. And on the other side of the leaf, what you do is actually write something you want the world leaders to take on. And it's a great thing to do. And you can send those away and they can be displayed as part of that Blue Zone event. You know, they can actually be displayed for the world leaders to read themselves. So again, it's another really great way of having them actively engaged. There's lots of other things as well you can do in terms of supporting the school community. We mentioned earlier the Lost Woods and different various events, you know, pledge evenings. There's lots of opportunities for parent councils to obviously contribute and to, you know, really celebrate, I suppose, what's going on. Another really great place to look is the heritage trails. These are accessible via the Glasgow City Council website. And when you go onto the website, it directs you towards what will be your area. And I think it's a really great way for you to explore, perhaps for your children, you know, to explore the areas they're walking past every day and maybe not realising the real heritage of the local area. It's also a really great way to explore other areas of the city perhaps you're not as familiar with. And the great thing is it's free. So, there's no cost attached to it. So if you were stuck in a Saturday afternoon thinking of something to do, that'd be a really good place to start and explore. Next slide, please. In addition to that, we've also mentioned all the great work going on around what I've been referring to as accreditation. So that's things that Geraldine's going to speak about later on with the Rights Respecting School. An incredible amount of work is in that, and it's real recognition for the work that people are obviously doing in school as well. We also have our green flags and the Growing Good Citizens awards as well, with the Acorn Awards. Fair trade is really, really visible in our schools. And again, for me, that's about using COP26 as a platform for furthering that learning for sustainability and thinking more about citizenship and the other broader aspects of the Sustainable Development Goals as well. So there's lots and lots of opportunities for parents to contribute to that and obviously become involved. Ask the school, are you involved with the RRSA? Are you involved with eco flags and Growing Good Citizens? If so, how can we as parents help and contribute towards that? Next slide, please. And also, what we would really love you to do is share this information, not just with people on your parent councils, but your broader parent communities as well. Some people can't come to parent council meetings for lots of different reasons, but using social media, for example, as a platform to try and engage those parents and get them involved in what's going on in the school as well. Also, thinking about the really practical elements of what, as a parent council, you can do. So lots of schools have got, for example, school uniform upcycling. Whenever you've still got a great uniform there, but the kids have just grown so much that you can pass it on to somebody else and use that. And that's also looking at, poverty and trying to address that for a lot of our families as well. And that's a really, really valuable thing to do. So if that's not already perhaps up and running in your school, that could be something that you're maybe thinking about. And again, it's about making use of the brilliant spaces we have in Glasgow. So many brilliant outdoor spaces, parks, and also things like your museums and things as well. So making use of what's just literally on our doorstep. We've also got a great wealth of skill within our parent body in Glasgow as well. So how can you use those skills to support the young people in schools through what we call DYW, that's developing a young workforce, and contributing in that way to show that actually as parents you've got a wealth of skills to offer, and this can be showcased in our schools in lots of different ways. So lots and lots of opportunities for you to become involved. As Andrea said, we're looking at hashtag Our Dear Green Place, and please do share all the brilliant work that's going on in your schools. We know there's lots of work going on in your schools, and we want to be able to support that in whatever way we can. So use that to get in touch with us, and anything we can do to support that, obviously, we are very, very keen to do. Okay.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for that. And obviously, those of you who are listening will be listening to this and thinking, I wonder if that's happening in my wee one's classroom, because wee people, when they come home, will tell you bits and pieces of the day. And often the most important thing to them was what they had for their play piece. And they remember that more than some of the other things that you really want to hear about. So get involved in having a little look on the YouTube to find out what individual schools are doing. Ask about this at your parent council. Have a look at the Twitters, because you will probably see your schools posting things up that they're involved in that you maybe want to hear more information about as you move forward. So we're going to pass on, really quite excited about this, to Geraldine Miller now from St Paul's in Shettleston. And she's just going to talk to you a little bit about their journey with the Rights Respecting School Award, because this is so interconnected, about the work on relationships and how that feeds into learning for sustainability and their work as we lead in to COP26.
Basically, our journey with children's rights probably started about 7 years ago now. I had a vision as a head teacher that I wanted the school to be a really safe place where everybody was welcomed and loved and no one was judged. So I think we kind of started looking at setting up children's committees when I went to St Paul's. But very quickly, through my observations, I realised that the children didn't actually have a voice. and it was because they had no skills in being able to articulate their own voices. Nobody had ever asked their opinion, and if they had been asked opinion, nothing had been actioned on it. So pupils' voice was really then at the centre of how we then kind of started in St Paul's, and we spent a lot of time working in the curriculum about talking and listening skills, about giving short talks, about why your opinion matters, and actually taking on board things that the children wanted to do. So when we asked them, what would you like? They gave us a list of suggestions, and then we worked down them and said, here's what you asked for, here's what we did with that, kind of let's move on. That was the starting point, I think, for us. But also in amongst giving the children voices, we also had to give the teachers voices, so that everybody could see that there was a value in people having rights, because everybody was listened to in St Paul's. And I suppose that was crucial for us. It was just this empowerment, and it probably came a bit like Andrea had said, because everybody said to me, that's going to be impossible. There's no way that we'll ever be able to do that, Geraldine. And I said, if we start to listen to one another and start to listen to the kids, we can do it. So it was kind of small changes that the children then started to do, and we looked around about the rights of the children, just in general, what were rights, what did that look like in your classrooms? So we had class charters where we kind of agreed, if you've got a right to an education, what does that right look like for the adults? What does that look like for the children? What do the adults need to do? What do the children need to do? And we kind of started there as a basis, and everybody agreed we would have this in our classroom. And then the rights respecting group then came to me and said, yeah, but everybody's not got that in the classroom. And I said, well, what do you want to do about that? Well, we should be able to speak to people. So they basically, it's built into our quality assurance programme that they go around and view everybody's class charters at the start of the session, and then give teachers and classes advice on how to, if you like, improve them. And that worked really well. Teachers were a bit at first, why are kids looking at it? And I was like, well, it's to do with the children's voice, and they have every right to do that. So I think that was something that kind of really started us thinking that wee bit more about that. And then through our pupil council group, the children had said that they wanted to look at mental health as part of our school improvement plan. So I kind of said, well, what does that mean? And one of the children said to me, basically what it is, Miss Miller, is it's to do with, if you go to the doctor, a doctor can see that you're sick, but you're actually sick on the inside and nobody can help you. And we really need to have lots of input in this. And I thought, okay. So the children voted that they wanted that on our school improvement plan. And we then looked with the children about how we could support their well-being. And children, I think, basically what Sarah was saying and Andrea was saying, children wanted their voices to be heard, they wanted to be listened to, they wanted to feel safe in St Paul's. So we came up with a kind of emotional scaling, which we do every day with the children. So there's a scale of 1 to 5. And if children come in, if you're at a 1, that's fine, and the teacher can start the learning and teaching. If people are at a 2 or a 3, the teacher will then kind of take them aside and have a chat to them. If there's a lot of children at 3, there's no way any learning is going to take place, so we don't do any learning. We then have a softer start to the day. We do a meet and greet every morning to make sure that the children know that we're actually physically seeing them and acknowledging them. Prior to COVID, we actually shook their hands. And that gives you a kind of sensory, like a touch and a look into somebody's eyes. And sometimes you can see exactly how a child's feeling. Also, we found in St Paul's, it was the first time that some children had been spoken to in that morning. So it gave us a real kind of foot in the door, all about that kind of well-being and how children were feeling. Because if we don't have those kind of relationships, we can't teach, we can't improve our outcomes for our children. So that worked really well. And then the children just became much more confident. and approached me and said, we don't like your promoting positive behaviour policy. And I was like, quite offended. There wasn't one when I came here, and I seemed to be working really well. And basically they said to me, it's not nice to name and shame people. And why should we have to earn our golden time? We've all got rights. We should all start off with, like, have this 30 minutes and everybody should just be given that, and we should be able to use that. That's our right. And I thought, they're absolutely right. And we had a kind of ladder, if you like, of earning golden points times. You know, you moved up the ladder or you moved down the ladder, and children were like, this is like, we're ashamed when we see our names up there. And that really made me think as a head teacher. It also made me think as a class teacher, because I had done all of that and thought my class are really well behaved, but actually they were behaving because they wanted to see their name going up while other children's were going down. It was really quite heartfelt. So the children then surveyed all of the children in the school about the behaviour policy, and basically what came back was they didn't like anything, and they wanted it more to be about relationships, and they wanted their class teachers to speak to them when they were distressed, and the distress was sometimes coming out as shouting at teachers or hitting out or lashing out at their peers. And that took a kind of whole mindset shift away from, oh, here comes the head teacher to come in a white charger and solve everybody's problems. Because what the children were saying was, I just want to talk to my teacher. I just want to talk to somebody. So that's really changed our promoting behaviour policy really to a relationships policy. And then that led us on, once the people's voices were being heard, then the children then kind of started looking just around the school and out with the school a wee bit. So we had a group of children who said that we know children in here who are hungry. What can we do about that? So they then wanted to start a food bank in school, which they did. Also, when Glasgow City Council were running the jackets for Glasgow City Council, my enterprise group said, no, we'll do it for our school. And they basically wrote letters to the local laundrette, got the laundrette to launder all of these jackets, but they came back to the school and then they just left them in a room and said to people, jackets are there, just go in and try on. And we didn't think that children would do that, and they did. And that really came from the children, which was quite good. And in terms of the food poverty thing, then we spoke to several people about the food poverty. And I know that it's about that kind of an equitable society, but we started that about 4 years ago and basically worked with a group of parents on cooking lessons. And then we began to look about, well, could we grow our own food and how could we do that? And these parents then came in and worked with their children, and we grew food, and it was called the plot to plate. So we actually grew food, and then we had recipes, and we worked with a dietitian from Harley Street who came up and worked with our families then. And then we had food champions from that, and people who were on our parent council, who are then the next generation. So we've kind of been doing lots of different things, if you like, in terms of just giving children a voice and a say. And it's been really scary as a head teacher to let go of control. But actually, if you were to come into St Paul's, it's a completely different place. I don't run a school, I run a family, and people will just come in, children, it's a revolving door. The head teacher doesn't really have a door, because people just come in and they come in and chat to you, and children will say, well, ask Miss Miller that, because we know that will happen, or I'm not happy about this. 2 weeks ago it was a head boy and head girl debate, and the children came and said, no, that's not a fair voting system, we want to change the voting system. And everybody had already voted, and I said, all right, okay, well, we'll just start again, because the children know that they're going to be listened to, so they're not afraid of articulating now. And that's really, I feel quite passionately as a head teacher, that that's what I want for all of Glasgow schools. And Andrea had said there are people on some of these pilot groups, and I'm one of the people on them, because I think that everybody in Glasgow deserves the same education, deserves the same right to have their voices heard, and it's just about all working together. And to be part of what's happening just now with our Dear Green Place and countdown to COP26 is magical. I've grown up in Glasgow and I'm working in Glasgow, and it is just, I want my children and the children of Glasgow to hold their heads up and go, we come from Glasgow, and what, you know? And I feel really, really passionate about that. And there's a definite difference when you allow children to have that voice at the centre. Andrea, have I gone on and on? Sorry.
You've been marvellous, and you were just making me well up a little bit there about it being magical and the children being involved and having that voice, which is just lovely. Okay, Leanne, if you want to open up to questions, and we also have Mark here from Glasgow Life, so if there's anything specific about family learning as well, Leanne.
Sure, so Catherine will read out any of the questions that we've got coming in.
Okay, I'm going to take two of the questions. I would normally take them in order, but I'll start with two that I think are about the same sort of thing. So the first one, can I ask about what the children and young people learn about where the climate and ecological crises come from, or who and what is causing them? And then there was a question along the same vein. Do young people learn about the role of the fossil fuel industry in causing climate change?
And the answer to that would be absolutely. And Sarah will maybe want to say a couple of words about this as well. One of the big things that the children have said to us repeatedly is that they want to know facts, that they want to know whole stories, that they need to understand the background. And if you, for instance, go to the launch and see some of the input there, then you'll see the kind of work and research and reference things that are happening around that input within their curriculum. And I would also have to say that particularly our older young people will be bringing to the table learning that we as teachers need to do around some of this. So it's a two-way street in it. Do you want to say anything about that in particular, Sarah? You need to put your mic up though.
Yes, there we are. Sorry about that. So yeah, absolutely. One of the things that the children said to us very, very clearly was that they didn't want protected or shielded from the truth. They wanted that kind of unfiltered, was actually the phrase they used. They wanted everything to be unfiltered. So whenever we are teaching children, we absolutely talk about the impact and, who is responsible and, the consequences of that. And it's not only just at a local level. One of the things that really struck me yesterday during our conversations was the children's global knowledge of what was happening, particularly around extremes of weather. This was something that came up time and time again, and you could see their real concern about it. Even just this morning on the news, reports from Norway about, ice and melting ice. The children are so tuned into that, and the children are very aware of how that happens, why it's happening, and most significantly, what we have to do to stop it. So absolutely, that truth is unfiltered to the children.
Okay, Catherine.
Could I come up in on that?
Yes.
I'm really interested in that, because if I'd been in the audience, it's probably the question I'd have asked. But I mean, yeah, like you, Andrea, I was kind of welling up there in terms of some of just the amazing work that's going on there. I do think that climate anxiety is something which is a really growing concern, and a concern at a whole load of levels. And one of the pieces of work, I work with a family learning team which works as part of Glasgow Life, working along with the team Improvement Challenge, and we're constantly trying to support teachers to bring family learning as a kind of central part, not a kind of additional, but kind of core to developing the curriculum and the learning experience. And I think the city has moved hugely to embrace that, but it's a huge challenge. I mean, it shouldn't be underestimated. We know the numbers here tonight are relatively small in comparison to the amount of parents that are out there. So given the task and you can see the amount of work already involved with teachers to deal with the kind of learning for sustainability, which is a huge agenda. That's why I think that family learning is an opportunity for the city to engage people. I think sometimes the parents think, well, the learning's done in the school and that's it. And what we've got to do is really challenge that attitude and say, you know, learning is 24/7, and the support is there from schools for parents, and they're also very sensitive to the fact that a lot of parents work, you know, many hours. They're under stress. But I think what we're trying to do with family learning is say the more you engage with your children in learning settings, the better it is for your health and well-being, for your educational outcomes. For, you know, it's a no-lose situation, and I think that people being more aware of these environmental issues and children's rights issues is all about creating the kind of society we all want to live in. And that can't be left to the schools. That's got to be something that every one of us is involved in. So for me, that's where that family learning and the kind of mainstream education just fit like that. And it's a fantastic opportunity.
Absolutely. And in terms of fossil fuels, which I think was part of that question, yes, that's a huge part of the discussion and the dialogue and the learning. And, you know, post-pandemic, although we are still within it, I think one of the big things that we have learned during that time is that governments can change, that actions can happen and quickly. And one of the things for us around fossil fuels is it's cost something like 5 trillion in subsidies a year across governments to subsidise fossil fuels. And that's almost similar to the GDP of a country like Japan. So there is money to do that. But for our young people, the discussion with them around all of this is that personal responsibility is a part of this, but collectivism and political literacy at every level for them as they grow through stage appropriate phases of their learning are what we are trying to work with our young people across all of the aspects of the learning that they undertake. But this is a biggie.
Yeah, all that I was going to say was, I'll give you an example. So primary 2 today, so that would be 5 and 6-year-olds, were learning about global warming through a science experiment. So they were looking at the effects of the ice and melting water and in the air. And we've done context for learning for our IDL topics this term. So with what's COP26, what's global warming. So we've got all of these headings, and the staff then got together and said, right, what does that look like in primary 1? What does that look like in primary 2? So when we were talking about global warming in primary 2, last week, the primary 5s had actually written about endangered species, and some of them had talked about polar bears and how that was coming from their habitat destruction, and that was to do with global warming. So it's just a bit like Andrea had said, it's age and stage appropriate, but we are challenging the children to understand these higher, the kind of premiership words, you know. So what global warming, so what does that look like to a primary 2? So if you bring it straight down to their level, then they begin to understand and then can see the impact of that. Primary 6s and 7s had been looking at the weather and what's going on in America just now with all of the different weather systems, because one of the girls' mums is working in that. So that was something that she brought in because her mum was dealing with that crisis over there. So it's just about finding what's relevant for the children in school. So it's really good that the Glasgow City Council have provided the resources, but then as individual schools, we can almost cherry pick what's appropriate for our children in our setting, but still developing those same skills, if that makes sense.
That probably takes us nicely on to the question. There was a question from Liz about is there a way to communicate all that's being done in schools to parents? And initially Liz was saying she felt she knew very little about them, but despite being very interested. So I then got into communication with her about, you know, had enough emerged during the presentation about how the communication is going to take place. And she said that, you know, really getting onto Twitter is something that she's picked up from tonight. And there's lots of links in the presentation that Leanne will share. But she was saying that pre-lockdown, she felt that some schools were maybe a bit tentative about announcing projects for fear of backlash, hoping that attitudes have changed over the last couple of years, but still feeling that schools could maybe have an environmental news update or a newsletter, something that's more accessible, because, you know, I would echo what she has said about Twitter has got vast amounts of information, and maybe it is taking Geraldine's point and making this quite specific to what's happening in school and the schools beginning to communicate, but we can't insist that all schools will do the same thing. So communication as ever is a challenge, but there is, you've picked up tonight that there's huge amounts of communication from the centre, and that maybe something a bit more tailored needs to happen in school. And that's where parent councils have a role in speaking to their head teacher to say, you know, we know that this is a massive priority for our city. We know that there's all this work going on. Can we as the parent council work with you to define and refine the communication that goes out from our school to let people know what is happening, you know, and that what our children are involved in?
Absolutely, Catherine. And one of the things, you know, the questions that could be raised by parent councils is around the updates on the school improvement plan, because this will be woven through most school improvement plans somewhere within them. It might not be called learning for sustainability at the top end, but it will be within maybe the well-being aspects, etc., that they're taking forward. And there could certainly, I think, be encouragement that is shared in newsletters, etc., going forward. A big job for parent councils to have those conversations.
Okay, we have one final question, which I'm sure we have time for, and this is quite a toughie, so I don't know who wants to pick this one up. So it's a question from Sam Bartlett. I'd like to ask how the council defines sustainability, please. The UN Sustainable Development Goals are predicated on economic growth of 3% per annum in the global north, thereby doubling the size of Western economy in 20 years, and 7% per annum in the global south. And I wondered whether there's any way they can be viewed as sustainable on a finite planet. So that's an easy one to end on.
That's a goodie, and we could probably be here for another couple of weeks unpicking that. But I think, you know, it might be slightly above my pay scale, that one as well. But there is a really important point in that, and it maybe comes back to what I said about the pandemic and the moment in time that we're in. I think that the UN themselves, in discussions sort of post-pandemic, we're looking at some of these sustainable goals, and there are aspects in them that we're moving on that are now no longer moving on, where perhaps it was preventable deaths among newborns and things, where there were real concerns during the pandemic and post the pandemic. So their conversations, I think, have been about looking forward. Are these the right goals? Are we hooking it in with economic growth in the right way? It comes back to what I just said about fossil fuels and the money that is used to subsidise fossil fuels. How are we looking at that? And how can we look at that sustainability being about equitably sharing and not assigning value to things that are not valuable, all of those things that I'm quite sure are coming through in that question there. So how do we move that forward and take that conversation to those people who are making these policy decisions about sustainable goals and how they're going to take that forward? I think Mark's got his hand up, or he's in the chat there.
Well, I've just put you've asked one of my favourite questions. I've got this brilliant book here. I don't know if you can see that.
Yep.
So less is more. So it's a guy called Jason Hickel now. There's also this organisation called Enough Scotland, which is a sort of degrowth charity. So it's an exceptionally good point, but it gives you a kind of idea of the transformative way that we have to enter into this kind of thinking. And I could only point as far as Christmas as to say, if you look at the huge amount of rubbish and the huge amount of debt that people get into around, you know, this idea of celebrating Christmas with more and more and more presents, that is something that we really need to have a conversation about that. The waste involved, but also the debt involved. And I hope, you know, we don't need to, spending money doesn't make us happy. And that is the bottom line. So those kind of questions, if we can start to move the conversation onto those and change people's attitudes and behaviours, then it's another win-win for us, because genuinely the system that we have at the moment is not good for our health and well-being, and it's devastating for the planet. So I think to be involved in trying to change that around is a really exciting place to be, and hearing what's going on in the city like Glasgow is amazing, and you'll find the similar type of stories in a lot of countries across the world, which is, you know, starts to give you a bit of hope.
It does start to give you a bit of hope, and I think it is, as Mark said, it's one of our favourite topics. My job isn't generally in amongst this arena, so it's been a bit joyful actually to be able to be in amongst some of this work in terms of my ongoing job. But I think, again, there has been talk around changing those goals, looking at it from a different way, having a really radical overhaul of them post-pandemic. I don't think it'll happen this week or next week, but I think there is definitely some movement in that. Some conversations about, you know, renaming them as transformations rather than goals, because the wording in this is incredibly important. And also, you know, that recognition from all of us that those who are most impacted on this tend to be those who are already living in the most difficult circumstances across the world. So huge conversations which we need to engage in. And Mark, a great idea about Christmas. Parent councils, ask that question. Do all those young people need selection boxes at Christmas with multiple wrappers? Or is there different things that parent councils can be engaging with in terms of Christmas fairs, in terms of recycling, reusing? You know, what kind of things can you guys help our schools with? Because this is a whole society effort. We only have your wee people a few hours a day and a few days a week. How can we do this together, and how can we include everybody?